Okay, let's talk about the heart and the cardio system in general. Okay, so the heart is not, so we as humans, we value symmetry a lot. If you look at your people are considered incredibly beautiful. They have very symmetrical faces, but we actually are not symmetrical internally. So one of the places where we see this is in the heart. It doesn't sit right in the middle of our chest. It sits mostly in the middle, but it points off to the left. So this person's left, and you see as a result, we also have an an unsymmetry of the vessels that come out of it too. And so what we're going to do today is really talk about, and you can see it even front to back, or dorsally and ventrally, it's not symmetrical. The spine sits ventral, sorry, that's dorsal, and then the heart is going to be in front of that, protected by the manubrium of the sternum mostly. And then you have the diaphragm, which is the muscle underneath. And while that doesn't have anything to do with the heart, it's really important because it's the contraction of the diaphragm that pulls the muscles, and the pulling of the muscles is going to what causes you to take in a breath, and then that will it doesn't affect the heart. I guess maybe it does, but that's going to be kind of pushing it on the heart space a little bit too. But you can see the lungs are different in shapes as a result of the heart being there also. So the left lung is, did I say this wrong? So this points off to this person's right. So the right lung, it says it, hello, has three lobes, has three parts to it, because it gets to fill up as much space as possible, while the left lung only has two parts, two lobes, because the heart kind of impedes on its space a little bit. Now, if you've ever taken a CPR training class or anything, what you're doing when you do that is you are forcing blood to go through the heart and then through the vessels that are connected, and we're going to talk about that today. You can see what the heart lines up right with the 5th through 9th vertebrae on the back side, on the spine. That just kind of gives you another view of it. So this is a CPR dummy. It's not meant to look creepy. It's supposed to be a CPR dummy. But let's kind of go through the functions and then the major parts of the cardiac system, cardiovascular system that you really need to know for this class. So the cardiovascular system is, when we think about this, we just think about the heart, but actually this also includes all the vessels that are connected to the heart, and this actually connects the heart to, it connects the blood to the entire body. So anywhere in your body, you are not more than one cell away from some vessel. Okay, so this is incredibly important because those vessels are veins, arteries, and capillaries. We'll get into the difference between all of these soon. So this is incredibly important because the whole function of the cardiovascular system is to deliver oxygen in an incredibly close range to every cell of the human body. So this is about one cell. Okay, the heart, people like to think of it as this emotional thing. You know, so many cultures have thought of the heart as the seat of the soul, and oh my goodness, now it's actually just a pump. It's a very, very, very important pump, and it is affected by emotions, but it itself is not anything more than a pump, okay? The vessels are the plumbing that then distribute this fluid that's being pumped by the heart throughout the entire body and then bring it back to be refilled with oxygen. Well, that doesn't happen in the heart, it happens in the lungs. This is really important because you have to be able to maintain a steady supply of blood and nutrients and waste disposal throughout the entire body. So we're maintaining homeostasis. Again, that's just a normal level, whatever that might be, is homeostasis, a normal functional level. We have to have this cardiovascular system in order to do this. You can't just, we'll talk about it later. Okay. Let's talk about what's happening with the heart. So there are a lot of diseases in which having an enlarged heart is actually incredibly dangerous. And the reason why is because the muscle of the heart is already really, really intense. And so we know that the bigger the muscle, the more intense the contractions are. So you can think about if the wall of the heart is so incredibly thick, most of that is all muscle. So myocardium, myo means muscle, card means heart. And so you have this incredibly huge muscle wall all around these sections of the heart. We're going to talk about how there's 4 chambers on the heart. There's the ventricles, which look like V's in my opinion, and then the atria, which are these two, atrium, atrium. Okay, this is actually, it looks like another chamber, but it's actually this vessel that's been cut through so you can see it. Okay, so the really important thing to know here is the myocardia. The myocardia itself and the heart itself has to be given its own oxygen supply and nutrient supply and everything. So it's important to keep these things very healthy, all these layers. You learned these layers in the first lab. We talked about the pericardium and then the outside the pericardial let's see. So this is the cavity that is, it's basically a space filled with fluid. And then here's the epicardium, which is it's this visceral layer of pericardium. It's basically this layer of tissue that just keeps the muscle tissue distinct from the cavity. So it's really important to have this pericardial cavity that's filled with fluid so that the heart has space in which to move. Because if it was right up against the parietal layer of the serous, but the next layer of the pericardium, it wouldn't have a space to move in. So it's very important. But let's actually look at how the muscle is structured within the heart. We have this swirling pattern of muscle tissue, which you don't really see anywhere else in the body. And this is incredibly important because it contributes significantly to the heart's ability to pump blood effectively. So this is incredibly important. These are very, very strong contractions because you have to push a very large percentage. You're not just pushing the blood through the heart, you're pushing it through the entire system. And so you're getting a huge push when you get this push from the heart. Okay, the arteries also help a little bit, but they can't do it all themselves. If you think about it, if you were to contract these muscles while they're in a swirl pattern, you're going to get a bigger squish of all of that blood moving through the heart wherever it may be going. And yes, you will need to know the pathway of the blood through the heart. So look at the volume present, the available space for blood within the ventricles when you have a relaxed vessel. Okay, so here is the ventricles when it's relaxed, and then look how much smaller this is when they're contracted. So you can imagine whatever was in here gets squished out whenever this contracts. So it's incredibly important. Even this one, the area is considerably smaller than this area. So that is a very important factor of that swirling pattern of those muscles, which is very important. So let's kind of take it back a second and talk about we talk about our heart being four-chambered. Why is that important? Do they interact? The answer is yes, and let's talk about it. So in a very, very simple circuit, like the fish circulatory system, there's only two vessels. You have all this blood flow that comes into the atrium, and then it gets squeezed into the ventricle, and then the ventricle gives it a really big push to go to the rest of the body, okay? So it's very, very simple. And then it goes from the heart to the gills, to the tissues, to the heart, to the et cetera, et cetera. It's one loop, okay? We are more complicated than a fish. Even the very, very big fish that are much bigger than us, we are more complicated. So since we're derived from the same, very, very ancient ancestors, it's a lot easier to take this system and make it a bit more complicated than to start completely from scratch. So let's talk about this. So there are some things that we have in common. Again, all organisms with true hearts have walls of cardiac muscle to allow for those big pumps. They have the atria. Really, is the big important part of this is just allowing blood to pool that can then be used to fill the ventricle. If you have kind of a big bubble within the ventricle that's not filling with blood, you're not getting an efficient pump, and so that needs to be able to fill completely with blood. Both of these do. In all cases, the ventricle is the one that contracts with the greatest force. So when you think about the lub-dub of your heartbeat, well, we'll talk about that in a second. We'll get to that. The other thing we have in common is that there are these one-way valves to prevent blood from backing up. Okay, so you don't want blood to be going whoop, 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 whoop. You want it to go in a straight pattern because that's going to be the most efficient way to move oxygenated or deoxygenated blood throughout the system. Okay, so let's look and see what's happening in the human heart. So we noticed in the fish, it's just one loop. But in humans, and in mammals in general, we actually have it's a double loop, basically. And the left and the right sides do not interact with each other. So when you're coming in, the way we kind of traditionally think about how blood comes into the heart, so we're saying blood's coming into the heart from the body. So by this time, it's given up as much oxygen as it possibly can. It's picked up a lot of carbon dioxide, and so it needs to go to the lungs so it can pick up new oxygen and dump off that old carbon dioxide. So remember, this is a function of hemoglobin, which we talked about in our blood lectures. And so here we have the blood's coming in, it's deoxygenated, it fills up the atrium. So this is our right atrium because, again, the idea is we're looking at someone in anatomical position, so we're looking at them. So it's this person's right on this side, and this is their left, whereas, this is vice versa, what we're looking at, what we're dealing with. So it comes into the right atrium, and then it goes into the right ventricle, and then it does not cross. Unless you have some sort of disorder where you have a weak muscle or some sort of perforated heart, there is no interaction of this deoxygenated blood that's getting a big pump through the heart, and this oxygenated blood, which is also getting just a pump through the heart. Okay, so we have, again, that deoxygenated blood comes in through the right atrium, the right ventricle, and then it leaves through the only artery in the body where you're so arteries always move away from the heart. So arteries away. This is the only artery in the body that doesn't have oxygenated blood. And so this is going to the lungs. So this is going to be a pulmonary artery. Okay, so it's not oxygenated because we don't pick up or lose oxygen in the heart. It's just literally a pump station. And so that blood goes to the lungs where it exchanges that carbon dioxide for oxygen. And now we have the only vein in the body that's full of oxygenated blood. So veins move towards the heart. So this is the pulmonary vein. And again, it's much more complicated than this. The pulmonary vein moves to the left ventricle. It gets pumped through to this is the left atrium. It gets pumped through to the left ventricle, and then it leaves the heart through the aorta and a bunch of other stuff that we will get to. So yeah, we totally got all that, right? Okay, no, it'll take you a few tries to get all this pattern down, but it is very, very important, so I highly suggest you practice that pattern a few times. So let's talk about a little bit more. So again, we have two circuits. We're bringing in deoxygenated blood through the right side of the heart, and then it goes to the lungs. And then we have oxygenated blood coming in through the left side of the heart and then going to the rest of the body. So we kind of get a figure 8 loop going on here. This is, the center part is called the septum. Anytime you have an area where you have two chambers that are separated by something, that's called a septum. So if you have a deviated septum that's a part of your nose or your lip that is, it's not separating two chambers like your nostrils or your mouth and your nose. All the walls are again made of muscle, and so they're all just really intense muscles that can pump things. And every single, let's see, between the atrium and the ventricle, and then the ventricle and whatever blood vessels coming next, there are these, again, one-way valves present, because you don't want to get backup, okay? So sometimes if you have a heart murmur, what's happening is these aren't closing completely, so you do get some backup, but it's a lot more efficient to pump in here, and then if this closes, so if this valve closes, then when you squeeze the blood out of this place, it doesn't go back. It can only go in one direction. So these are very, very important directional valves, and we're going to talk about what they are all called. Okay, so I just did all of this, but we'll do it again. So also don't forget that we traditionally call or designate deoxygenated blood or oxygen depleted blood. We put it in blue. That doesn't mean it actually is blue. It just appears blue through our veins appear blue through our skin, but they are not actually blue. It's just an optical illusion through skin. Our arterial blood is a more orangey blood because when you have iron bound to oxygen, you get, like, if you think about rust, it's kind of an orangey color, and that is iron bound to oxygen in a different state. And so kind of keep that in mind. Our venous blood is actually just a purpley red, more than an orangey red, but it's not actually, it's just easier to color it as blue to distinguish, oh, this must be the side that's not oxygenated. This is the side that has come from the lungs, and so it is oxygenated. So we have 4 chambers. We have a right and a left atrium and a right and a left ventricle. We have 4 major vessels we'll talk about, okay? And we have 4 one-way valves. So let's get into everything. So let's talk about those 4 major vessels. So we bring in, so here we go. To and from tissues go up and down. Okay, so to and from lungs go side to side. That's what this is saying. So if we're coming to or from the body, we come into the heart. Either if you're coming from like the guts or the muscles of the legs, you're going to be coming up this. Okay, this is your vena cava. I think I called something atrium, or well, anyway. This is your your vena cava. Da, da, da. So this is the inferior vena cava. So vena means vein, so this is your giant vein or cavernous vein. So you have an inferior vena cava coming from everything below. Your superior vena cava is coming from the head and the brain and the upper torso. So this connects up here with the jugular vein, if you're talking about the part of the head. It comes in, it's going to come through the right atrium, the right ventricle, and then get pushed out through the pulmonary system. So here are your pulmonary arteries. We're moving away from the heart, so they're arteries. Okay, it goes through the lungs, and then it comes back through these pulmonary veins. Again, this is the only time in the body where these are reversed, in that the artery does not have oxygen-rich blood. The veins do have oxygen-rich blood. Every other system, once you're leaving the heart, you are full of oxygenated blood. Okay, so that's what happens. It comes in full of oxygen. It goes through the atrium, which gets a little pump, and then it gets a huge pump from the left ventricle, and it leaves through the aorta. And this is the aortic arch, and these are more vessels coming off of the aortic arch to go to the head and the upper torso and the arms, but most of that's going to be going down to the guts and also to the legs and everything else in between. Okay, so one way to remember this is that arteries go away. So the same way I like to think that we think of ventricle, I remember ventricles are on the bottom because it looks like a V, kind of has a V shape here. And if you kind of can pick, kind of over simplify it, the A's are on top. And if you've taken any Latin like I have for years and years, the atria is the part of a house that is open to the sky. It's also where the word attic comes from. So that's these are basically the attic of the heart. Don't overthink it. Artery means go away. So that anytime you have a vessel that's moving away from the heart, that's an artery. That's going to become really important because arteries have a different structure than veins do, and they do different things. We will get to it. The one-way valves are incredibly important. So again, here we have our vena cava coming in, and it's coming into the right atrium, and then it has to go through the tricuspid valve, which is also called the right arterioventricular valve. So guess what that means? It goes through the artery. It's between the artery and the ventricle. It's very complicated. This is also sometimes called it's right here, the tricuspid valve. I haven't seen that in texts lately. Usually people just call it the arterioventricular valve. No, sorry, it's the bicuspid we don't see as often. But so usually we just call this a tricuspid. That means it has 3 parts to it. That means that when it gets, it just means it has 3 parts. There's no reason. So then we're in the ventricle. How do we make sure that, what's the next place where we go? We go through the pulmonary artery. So here we go. So there's a pulmonary valve. Okay, so you can think there's 2 of these arterioventricular valves. There's one between this atrium and ventricle. That's the tricuspid. And then we have the bicuspid that's between this atrium and ventricle. Okay, it's also called the mitral valve. Bicuspid, I think because Dennis kind of took it over. We don't call it the bicuspid as much. We normally call it the mitral valve, but I don't think it's wrong to call it either one. So we have the tricuspid and the bicuspid, or mitral valve, which are between the atria and the ventricle. And then we have the pulmonary, it's from the right ventricle to the pulmonary arteries. And then we come back through the pulmonary veins into the atrium. We go through the mitral valve into the ventricle, and then we go out through the aortic valve. And so it's easy to remember that this is the aortic valve because it goes to the aorta. Okay, so again, very important to know the names. Yes, make sure you know them all. Okay, so what happens? What's the point of these? Did I say veins? I meant valves. So what's the point? So they work in concert. So, so the pulmonary and then also the aortic valves are also called semilunar valves because when they're open, they look kind of like half moons, whereas you can't say that about the tricuspid and the mitral valves. They just look like big cavernous openings, okay? They do look like, if you think about your molars, they kind of look like molars, which are different from bicuspids, but whatever, when they're closed. So the 2 smaller valves work together, so they're going to be closed when the 2 large valves are open, okay? And then vice versa, when the 2 large valves are closed, these 2 are open, and it goes back and forth so that you don't get blood going in the wrong direction. Very, very important. All right. Ooh, what's happening? What's happening? Da-da-da. Let's move this thing because it's going to annoy me. There we go. Oh, this is so important. There we go. All right, so what's happening with the cardiac cycle? So there we go. If you've ever taken blood pressure, you know that systole is the number on top of a blood pressure reading. Diastole is the number on bottom. What does that mean? So systole is when your chambers are contracting, so they're squishing. And then diastole is when they relax and are allowed to fill back up. Okay, so it's not that they kind of suck in the blood, it's that they relax. It's like with your diaphragm. You don't react, when we think about taking in a breath, what we're actually doing is, we'll get to that. But the difference between taking in a breath and exhaling is not that in one case you suck in air, in the other case you blow it out. well, it's actually more simple than that. And it's the same thing happening here. So we squeeze to get a diastole, and then we just let it relax in order to get, sorry, this is oh my gosh, I'm just on a roll tonight. We squeeze to get the systole, and the diastole is when we just let it relax, and then it fills back up because there's a lot of pressure behind it to make sure it's just going to fill back up. Okay, so it's not more complicated than that. So we usually start here in diastole when we're talking about the cycle, and then we go into there's two parts to it. So first we have, to the systole, first we have the atria squeeze, and then we have the atrial squeeze while the ventricles are in diastole, the atrial systole while the ventricles are in diastole. Whoops, let's get that back. And then we reverse. The ventricle goes systole, so the ventricle contracts while the atrium is relaxed. And so this is important. You don't want them to happen at the same time. You're going to get stuff squeezing backwards and breaking valves and stuff. So it happens in concert. It happens in sequence, right? So first we have a complete relaxation, and then the atria squeezes while the ventricles are relaxed, and then the ventricle squeezes while the atria are relaxed, and then it goes through it again and again and again. Okay, so the lub-dub that you hear whenever you're listening to a heartbeat is actually the slamming shut of those valves, okay? So that bump-up, bump-up that you're hearing is when first the semilunar valves are closed, and then all of a sudden the other one, the semilunar valve, so this is the lub, is when the semilunar valves close. And then when the other valves, the pulmonary valves are closed, that's when you hear the dump. Okay, so you're hearing that overlap. The bup is just literally when those things crash shut. All right. So, this is a beautiful gift to kind of get you to think about what's happening. So, diastole was when they're both relaxed. And then systole happens in parts. So, when the atria are in systole, the ventricles have to be in diastole. When the ventricles are in systole or contraction, atria have to be in diastole. And you're going to have to watch this in parts. And this will be in the slides that are posted also so you can see this. But so we have the blood comes in. In order for the blood to come in, the valves have to be closed if they're coming into the atria. And notice the atria fill at the same time. And then when the atria contract, it pushes the blood into the ventricles. When the ventricles contract, it's pushing the blood out of the heart. Okay, it's going into two different places. This one goes to the lungs. This one goes to the rest of the body. But it happens at the same time. So again, this is an advantage of having a 4-chambered heart instead of just a 2-chambered heart. It's basically doing 2 different things at once. Let's admire the beauty for a few seconds. Watch it fill, and then these 2 fill, and then those 2 fill, and then it gets rid of everything. So what's happening with all these pretty colored lights? What's happening? Well, we're going to talk about that too, because none of this would happen without a neural input, okay? So there's this action potential conduction going on. So we're going to talk about these parts. The first thing is the SA node. This is the pacemaker. What this does is the first thing that happens is the parts of your brain that are in this brainstem control stuff like heartbeat and the speed of heartbeat and just making sure it's all regulated, okay? So the first thing that happens is the medulla sends a signal to the heart saying, it's time to beat! And the first thing it does is it goes to the SA node. And the SA node, or the sinoatrial node, is just what makes the atria contract. Boom! So that is this very first little node. A node is just where a bunch of vessels are coming together and like signaling between each other, okay? So that's this part. So there's our SA node happening. What's the next thing that happen? That sends a signal to this. So what's that? That's going to be your AV node. So we have an SA node and AV node, okay? What that does is it sends a signal down to what's called the bundle of His, which is another set of nerves. And then that is going to cause the Purkinje fibers to send an impulse throughout all of the ventricle. Okay, both ventricles, they're much bigger parts, they're much more heavily muscled, so you have to kind of have a much bigger coordinated system, and then that's going to cause the ventricular contraction, okay? So watch what happens. We have to have light up, then the contraction of the ventricle doesn't happen until the Purkinje fibers fire too. Okay, so it has to be incredibly coordinated. If it isn't coordinated, in a heart attack, what happens is it's not that your heart stops beating, it's that this very important pattern gets completely disrupted. So instead of it going SA node, AV node, bundle of His, Purkinje fiber. It kind of like jumps around sort of crazy, or it happens too fast and your heart can't keep up with it. So whenever you have a defibrillation happen, so if you have the paddles basically, what happens is you're basically shocking all of this into stopping, and then the brain sends a signal saying, okay, let's restart. It's like hitting restart on your computer or your phone. You're basically turning it on and off again, which is important. Okay, so what's an echocardiogram telling us? So electrocardiogram or an echocardiogram, which is a different way to interpret it, but it's still getting the same information. It's a different way to get the information. Is telling you it's a snapshot of the heart. Okay, so it's basically reading each one of those firings of the SA node and the AV node and everything else. But what it's giving you is what's happening in your heart. Okay, so we normally have about 60 to 100 beats per minute of heartbeats. Okay, if you have something called tachycardia, if someone's going into tachycardia, tachy means fast. That's usually defined as having more than 100 heartbeats per minute, while bradycardia is less than 60. So both of these are very bad. You don't want to, as humans, we live in a very specific range of needs, okay? And so you have to kind of keep it within the 60 to 100. If your heart is beating way too fast, you're not going to have time for that those blood cells to drop off oxygen and pick up carbon dioxide. It's just going to be rushing through the system way too fast. If it's going too slow, you could get a buildup of toxins that should be moving away from cells more quickly, and they're not, and you could have cell death happen. So fibrillation is just any kind of chaotic pattern. Okay, and anytime you have any one of these last three, tachycardia, bradycardia, or some sort of fibrillation, that's just called an arrhythmia. And so if we can detect this, we would detect these using an echocardiogram, okay, or an electrocardiogram. This is what we're seeing, like if someone starts to go into any kind of cardiac arrest or a heart attack, that's what we're seeing, is some sort of disruption in this normal, very stereotypical pattern. So let's see what's happening here. So we have different waves of depolarization. And when we talk about depolarization, we're talking about those neurons. If you need a refresher, go back to the neuron lecture. Okay, so we have this P wave, and that's when you're going from the SA node to the AV node. Okay, so that's going to be this part. Okay, so that happens over a certain amount of time, and it's basically allowing the atria to fill up. Okay. And then the next part is we have the QRS complex. So that's when we're going through so the P wave activates the atria by activating the SA node. The QRS is actually doing three different things. That's going through the AV node, the bundle of His, and the Purkinje fibers. And so that's why we have QRS. Okay, so this is just called PQRST because that's just the order of letters. I don't know what else is happening there, but that's what we're going with. And so this is the SA node firing. This is the Purkinje nodes, Purkinje fibers firing. And then the T wave is basically a recovery period. It's a refractory period so that everything can just go back to normal. And then it all starts over again. Okay, so when you have a normal heartbeat, it kind of looks like this. So here's our atrias filling, and then we have it contracting, and then we have the ventricle contracts on that bigger one. And you can see it has to be a bigger, more concerted effort because the ventricles are so big and they're so muscled. They have to have a much, remember, muscle contractions only happen when that neuromuscular junction is stimulated by acetylcholine. Well, that's a whole lot of acetylcholine to have to release all at once in order to make this happen all at the same time. So you're going to have to recover after that. You have to get that acetylcholine back, and then you dump it again, and you do it again and again and again. So it makes sense that this is a very strong pulse, and then it takes some recovery time. So a fast heartbeat is going to look more like this. A slow heartbeat is definitely going to move it out. An irregular heartbeat can look like anything. It's just not going to look normal. So you can see that it's kind of tachycardia here, and there's some bradycardia, and then like what's happening? All right. So what are some things that control heart rate? Because so first of all, if we had to control our heart rate ourselves, we would all be dead. If we had to it's hard to think about what you are going to eat for breakfast. So how are you going to think to be able to control your heartbeat? It would be insane. So fortunately, our brain does it for us. So we have the autonomic nervous system, which remember is that kind of, the autonomic is the just everything's chill. It's your nervous system. Okay, it's sorry. Oh boy, it's your brain. It's basically your very. I think of autonomic as automatic. It's everything's. It's the involuntary stuff. That's what I should have said it first. It's your involuntary system. It's a very rapid response. So it normally the medulla, the pons, and the brainstem are just like, let's just make sure the heart is beating normally. No big deal. So the cerebral cortex. Oh yeah, that's another part of the brain that we talked about. Tells the hypothalamus, hey, everything's cool. And the hypothalamus says, all right, cool. Then medulla, make that heart beat. No problem. So that's one way, is just through these three parts of the brain. So we also have receptor reflexes. And so these are just things that are happening within the rest of the body that send signals to the medulla, such as baroreceptors. What these are doing is in the carotid artery, which is the one going up to your head, and in the aorta, which is the one coming right off your heart. These are very short-term, immediate control sensors that tell the body what's our blood pressure like. So if you're talking about barometric pressure, talking about, well, any kind of baro means pressure. So you're talking about the blood pressure, your immediate blood pressure. So it's really important to kind of self-check what the blood pressure is like right as you leave the heart. So if you're leaving the heart and you leave and suddenly the blood pressure has dropped considerably, well, you might need to increase heart rate in order to kind of keep up with that. And it's also really important to control your blood pressure as you're moving into the brain, because our brain uses 25% of all of our energy and our oxygen, considering it's only like, maybe 5 to 10% of our body weight. It's a huge percentage. And also, as soon as your brain stops working, you can't control your heartbeat. And so it's kind of another self-check system at a different level. We can also control our heartbeat through emotions and stress events. And it's not that we're controlling it, it's that different things are happening. So if you are stressed out, or if you're scared, or if like you see someone you like, or if you see something that makes you nervous, you release all of these things. Your body treats the exact same way, which is kind of ridiculous, but hey, it keeps us from dying. So, and it's good to have one system to regulate. Basically, we could go on for hours. So the hormonal regulation of heartbeat, which is a lower onset, includes something like epinephrine from the adrenal the adrenal medulla, which is the center of the adrenal gland, or cortisol, which is the more long-term stress hormone, which actually we have a bad habit of, as humans, especially as westernized humans, of thinking ourselves to death, which you will never see a zebra do, or a lion do, or even your dog do. The idea that we can read a book, or like stress out over taxes or tests or whatever, from an animal standpoint, is really stupid. Those things can't kill you themselves, but when you stress out about it, they sure can. And one problem is that when you stress out too much, you release too much epinephrine, you release too much cortisol, you're overtaxing your heart, you're making it beat too fast, you're causing way too much blood pressure problems. And that is one of our lead killers, is cardiovascular disease. So another hormone that regulates, that we are better about not killing ourselves with, is aldosterone. So this is a hormone that's regulated by it comes from the adrenal cortex. So the now I can't remember if core is etc. Anyway, the adrenal cortex is part of the adrenal glands, which again sit right on top of the kidneys, and they when the kidney gets a signal that it doesn't have enough salt, or if the blood is kind of too dilute, or maybe it's not dilute enough, or it's just something is different, your salt content is slightly off, it sends a signal that says, hey, aldosterone, go and make us, we need to make sure we need to take in more salt, because if we take in more salt, we're also going to take more water, just by the rules of osmosis. So aldosterone, when it gets a signal that our blood pressure is incorrect, especially if it's really low, it goes and tells the kidneys, hey, start taking in more salt and water. Let's increase this blood pressure. Hopefully that wasn't too convoluted. So let me sum up really quickly. So we can either control our heart rate just through the nervous system, through the autonomic or automatic nervous system, or involuntary system, through a couple brain regions, or through some baroreceptors, that sense pressure in the aorta and the carotid artery. These are very short-term, immediate control of heart rate. We also have these more long-term or slower onset. They seem instantaneous to us, but it's actually really slow compared to nervous control. So we can either control our heart rate through emotions, like with adrenaline and cortisol, those two stress hormones, or with a hormone that deals with blood pressure, aldosterone, um, this becomes, yeah, we'll talk about that later in more detail when we talk about the kidneys. Okay, so this just kind of, yeah, let's just go on. Okay, let's talk about the vessels themselves. So we have several different kinds of blood vessels. So our arteries again, arteries move away from the heart, and you'll notice they are very, very muscled, okay? They're not nearly as thickly muscled as the heart itself, but they are much more thickly muscled than the veins. So veins have a very, very light coating of muscle around them. Arteries have a very, very thick coating of muscle, okay? That means that they have a much higher pressure because each artery can have this pulse of muscle action all the way down it. They also are bigger, so they also tend to sit much lower or much more deeply in our body, whereas veins tend to be very superficial. Okay, they're more close to the surface. So this is important. We all, or maybe some of us know that if you cut an artery, you run the risk of bleeding out, because what happens is you have this very powerful wave of contraction that goes down the artery, pushing the blood continuously, just pushing the blood down the system. And so if you get a cut here, you're just going to have this big wave of push, continuously, and you could potentially lose all your blood before this finally heals up. So this is very, very dangerous. On the other hand, veins are, so that's part of why arteries lie very, very deep within our tissue, okay, within our tissue layers, within our arms and legs. Whereas veins tend to be the ones that are more closer to the surface, because if you do cut a vein, it doesn't have that big muscle flow behind it, and so it doesn't pump itself out before healing factors happen. And so veins it's much more, if we're comparing the two, it's a lot safer to cut a vein than it is an artery, so it's okay for these to sit closer to the skin and potentially take more damage. Okay, so arterioles are just smaller versions of arteries. Basically, we have an artery. Let's see if I have a better diagram. Let's see. Okay, so if you have an artery coming off the heart, so it's impossible to get, so we're talking about like these blood cells. Let's see. Yeah, I guess we'll get to these valves in a second. So there's a lot of blood in this system, and it's just blood cells pumping through. But a blood cell isn't going to be able to lose its oxygen into this muscle layer and then out of the muscle layer into the tissue that's beyond it. So what has to happen is you have to have arteries that get smaller and smaller and smaller, and there's not a real clear distinction when an artery becomes an arteriole, but there is a clear distinction when you get this very fine netting where the arteries come into capillaries, or the arterioles come into capillaries. So these are it's a very net-like structure where all the arteries get really, really thin, and they can start losing their oxygen and losing nutrients and picking up waste products and picking up carbon dioxide, because they're basically only a cell thick. So when blood goes through them, it can only happen one at a time. So that's, yes, there we go. So this is a capillary bed. We're going to get into this in just a second. Well, I guess we'll get into it now. This should say diffusion. So the walls of a capillary bed are only one cell thick. So as this is a blood cell going through a capillary. So what's happening is the blood cell can then release its contents into the surrounding area, and then that area picks up that oxygen. And then the area also has a bunch of carbon dioxide left over that the blood cell then picks up with its hemoglobin. So when you talk about a bunch of capillaries together, that's a capillary bed. They have the largest cross-section area, okay? So that means, so if you think about, it's kind of like on a highway. If you have a really big 10-lane highway, cars can go really fast. But if you have a neighborhood with lots of really small streets, cars have to slow down. They're more likely to run into things. You have passengers coming in and out. So blood flow, the cars in a neighborhood, which is our analogy of a capillary bed, have to slow down. So it's the same thing in a capillary bed. It's very, very thin. Stuff is coming in and out of the blood cells in the blood system itself. So blood is going to flow a lot slower here. This also allows for more time for diffusion. So again, if you have tachycardia and your blood is just pumping way too fast, then this is going to be flowing through a capillary bed way too fast. That can cause ruptures of the capillary bed. It can also cause the blood cells to go through so quickly that they don't drop off oxygen or pick up carbon dioxide or any nutrients or anything. All right, so capillary beds are also very leaky. So if this is a capillary vessel, the endothelial cells that make it up are not as closely packed, which allows for fluid and small molecules to move in and out of a capillary bed really easily, which is good because otherwise we wouldn't be able to exist because there'd be no way. You could have this perfectly smooth tube with no leaks, and then there's no reason to even have blood flowing because it's not like you could drop off the oxygen or pick up nutrients or pick up or just drop off nutrients or anything. So it's very important. Okay, so here is what's happening. So we have an artery flowing, and then every time you get a branch and it gets smaller, that could be an arteriole. Okay, so what are these things? These are precapillary sphincters. So if you have an area of the body that for some reason needs to be cut off from blood flow, such as in hypothermia, where you're losing way too much heat through this very fine system, well, you can actually cut it off. Or if you have a cut, so let's say you have a cut in just this part of the vein, well, the arterial side has these sphincters, which can cut off blood flow through this part of the system until it heals. Okay, so we can control the blood going through capillary beds through these sphincters. Okay, so we have blood flowing through. Some of it shunts off to the arteriole, and then it shunts off into the capillary bed itself. We start losing some oxygen, we start picking up carbon dioxide, and then we go into the vein, and then we go back to the heart, and then the whole system starts over again and again. So our arterioles, our arteries and arterioles are going to be full of lots of oxygen. We have the capillary bed where gas exchange and nutrient exchange happens. And then when we get into the vein, it's going to be much lower levels of oxygen. All right. Yeah, we're not going to go into super detail. It kind of is just more close deeds. Basically, as your blood is flowing, we have both hydrostatic pressure, so just the pressure of that blood flow system, just pushing stuff out of the arterioles into the capillary bed, into this interstitial fluid, which is surrounding all the cells. And then we also have osmotic pressure, which is saying, well, now we have this really salty area. We're going to start moving that fluid that left because of hydrostatic pressure back into the capillary, and then it can leave through the vein. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, we're not going to talk. Well, we'll just keep going from that. Don't worry about that too much. Here we go. So let's talk about venous blood flow. So venous blood flow is when, if you think about what's happening with our veins, they don't actually have their own muscle system. There's some muscle, but it's not very much. What actually causes blood to move through the veins is not only the push of the arteries behind it, which isn't as powerful in this way, but it's the skeletal muscles that are surrounding it. So every time you move or you twitch or whatever you're doing, anytime you move a skeletal muscle, you're helping blood flow through your veins. That's part of why exercise is so good for you. You want to get your blood flowing. Well, you're literally getting your blood flowing by every time you move a skeletal muscle. That doesn't mean that while you're sleeping, your blood isn't flowing, but your blood flow does decrease when you're sleeping, but also doesn't need to be as high pressure when you're sleeping because you're not using as much oxygen. So it all kind of balances out. So every time you contract a skeletal muscle, you cause blood to squeeze through the heart. Or sorry, not the heart, to the vein. So this is very important then that we have these valves to make sure if you're squeezing right here, if we didn't have valves in our veins, well, it could go in both directions. So you want to make sure that blood is not flowing back to a capillary bed. You want it to go to the heart so it can pick up more oxygen. So, and also just breathing is enough to change the pressure in the thoracic cavity, which kind of sort of sucks blood back a little bit. So what happens when these valves fail? Well, that's what a varicose vein is. That is kind of these valves fail due to a collapse of some sort or whatever's happening. Blood flow starts to it just pools in these regions, and that's a varicose vein. They can be incredibly painful. They also can be fixed. You just go in and you close off that vein, and there'll be another vein that's over here that could then take up the slack, and then like this is an extreme example. We'll all eventually get one or more varicose veins. We just go in and we fix it, and everything's fine. I don't know if we all get more one, but just take care of yourself is the basic thing I'm trying to say. Again, the more you contract your skeletal muscles, the more you're kind of helping your veins function. If the less you contract your skeletal muscles, so this is where people are saying the idea if you sit down all day, it's bad for you. Part of that is if you're not moving your leg muscles, well, you're relying on your veins to pump through those those one-way valves all by themselves. Well, if you're moving around and you're flexing muscles, then you are actually putting less strain on your valves and helping out so that this kind of deterioration doesn't happen so badly. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about blood pressure. This is definitely one of the number one things that happens at the doctor's office. So, um, it's kind of the first way to know that something bad might be happening in your system is what's happening with your blood pressure. Okay, so what is blood pressure? So when the blood pressure is just how much pressure your blood is putting on the rest of your vessels. So we take it by measuring the systolic pressure over this diastolic pressure. So when you put on a blood pressure cuff or a sphygmomanometer, okay, it's not fun to spell. What happens is you cut off blood flow, okay? So when you cut off blood flow and then you start letting it come back, the first thing you're going to start here, so first you hear nothing, and then you start very slowly releasing the pressure on the cuff. You're going to start hearing these turbulent sounds, okay? And then as it kind of kicks back and forth, as the blood flow goes back to being smooth, you take the difference in when you hear your first sounds that I don't know how to pronounce. It's named after this German doctor. And a certain secondary sound. Okay, so it's kind of a thumping. And you're not hearing the heart, you're hearing the turbulence in a vein, or in an artery, actually. We say we're looking for veins where it's actually an artery we're listening for. And that difference, so first you're listening to that systolic pressure. So it's kind of the accumulation of the arterial systole and the ventricular systole. And then the diastolic pressure, which is when everything's relaxed. In a normal blood pressure should be about 120/80. Milligrams of mercury, that's what this says, is an antiquated but still useful way of measuring pressure. Don't worry too much about it. Okay, it's very important because any kind of little change can affect your blood pressure. Okay, so we're not going to go into let's just keep going. So a lot of things that can affect this. It can be how strong your heart is going to affect how much cardiac output you have. So how much per beat, so how much blood are you pushing per beat, and also how fast is that happening. And then peripheral resistance is how much stuff happening in your blood vessels is preventing flow. So your cardiac output is how good your heart is, and then your peripheral resistance is what stuff out in the rest of your body is preventing flow. So this could be how thick your blood is. Like if you haven't had enough water lately, it's going to be a lot thicker. If you've had a lot of cholesterol buildup, that's going to be incredibly thick. Okay, and the friction, so what is kind of sticking to the walls of your blood vessels, like arterial plaques, which could slow this down. So those are two things that are going to really affect your blood pressure. There's something called Starling's Law, which is basically saying the more blood coming back to the heart through the veins, the stronger the contraction of the ventricle. So basically, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. As you bring in more blood to the heart, it's going to have to pump more blood. There is an upper limit, and it's just a limit to the physiology of humans, and it has to do with how big our muscles are and how efficient they are, and how good they are at fighting gravity. We're just going to leave it at that. So what controls blood pressure? So we talked about what controls heart rate. A lot of the same things control blood pressure. So again, our cerebral cortex, cerebral cortex, remember, that's the more thinky part of our brain, that can control, there's something that's been kind of co-opted from the brainstem that's now in the cerebral cortex to kind of control blood pressure. Thank goodness also we can't, anyway, let's just keep going. We also have these receptor reflexes, again, through the baroreceptors that can sense blood pressure. And it's, again, in the carotid artery and in this case, in the aorta, instead of the, no, it was the aorta, the aorta was the other one also. And again, this is sensing pressure, but we can also sense chemical change. So if we sense a whole lot of hydrogen, that means we have a whole lot of oxygen present, because it's a water reaction. Then, and if we have not a lot of carbon dioxide, we might increase blood pressure because we have a lot of extra hemoglobin. We also, if we have really high carbon dioxide, that tells us we actually have a problem. We aren't clearing that carbon dioxide as quickly. So the chemoreceptors just are keeping its track of what's happening. And these are actually reflexes. So this happens at the spine level and not in the brain itself. Okay, we also again have those same hormonal controls. We have epinephrine, which can affect, not only does it affect how fast our heart is beating, but it affects, it's basically a stress, anytime you have a stress response, your body is like, oh my God, get oxygen to everything as quickly as you can. We don't care about anything else. We have to have muscles with a lot of oxygen so we can escape this scary situation, even if that scary situation is like public speaking. It does not help you to have high blood pressure when you're giving a public announcement or a speech or a lecture or whatever, but your brain doesn't know any better, so it increases your blood pressure in those kinds of situations if you think about them incorrectly. And again, having a very high salt diet or any kind of fluctuation in salts activates aldosterone, which is a hormone that controls how much salt and water you're retaining. So more salt and more water in your blood system, the higher your blood pressure. It's just you're overloading the system with more stuff, so there's going to be higher pressure. All right, we're going to keep going. Okay, so what are some ways that our cardiovascular system can kill us? So atherosclerosis is the #1 killer in the U.S. So all of our top, I think it's our top 4 or 5 major deaths in the U.S. are all related to the cardiovascular system. It tells you how important the cardiovascular system is, and it also tells you how good we are at messing it up. So atherosclerosis is the buildup of plaques, which in this case does not mean the stuff on your teeth, though it is similar. What it is any kind of, it's a cholesterol buildup on the edges of arteries. And anytime you do this, so here we go, we have some sort of inflammation caused by hypertension, by smoking, by diabetes, by high cholesterol, by viruses. They're finding out more and more inflammation could be due to gluten intolerance sometimes. A lot of people say if they don't eat gluten, and actually what's happening there is you eat a lot of gluten, you have this huge, and this is where the diabetes comes in, you have a big insulin spike, and then if insulin isn't cleared properly, and if the glucose isn't cleared properly, you get an inflammation spot. Well, why is that bad? Well, that's because then you have all these white blood cells that come in and try to fix it really quickly with a very stopgap system that should not happen very often, but does happen, where you just lay down a whole lot of lipid and cholesterol right underneath that to get a little padding. Well, if you keep doing that over and over and over, that padding, that cholesterol gets calcified. So you just throw in a bunch of calcium in there, and it's called a plaque at this point. It gets really, really hard. And then your body's like, well, good enough, and it doesn't do anything about it. It doesn't clear it. It doesn't get bigger. It doesn't get worse, but it definitely, once it's at a point, you've taken what should be a nice big area for blood to flow through, and you've cut it basically almost in half. Okay, the more that happens, you can then have more inflammation. It causes the artery to get bigger, and if you have an artery that gets too big, you could have an aneurysm. It could get infected, and then more stuff sticks to it, and then blood pressure increases even more. It's crazy. So what's so bad about it? You could occlude or block the entire artery. So a lot of times when people get, they have heart surgery, like my dad had a triple bypass. What that means is what happened to my dad is he had 3 parts of his heart that basically were dying because he had been smoking since he was 15 years old until like last year when he was 60 something. And so he started building up a whole lot of clots in the blood vessels that fed his heart. And so what they had to do, sometimes they can go in and they just can kind of blow out that little section, and they put in what's called a stent, and it just opens it up. It basically opens up this tube. Okay, it forces it to open up in a certain way. But in other cases, they have to go in and literally scrape it out, or take another part. Like for my dad, they took out part of his femoral, something in his femoral vein, or I guess it has to be his femoral artery. And then they took out the part that was bad, and they just replaced it with something that was good, and his body was totally fine with it. So why is it bad? So why would it be bad to have your arteries get clogged up forever? Well, you could get a thrombus, which is a blood clot. So that's just a roaming clot that once it gets into so a thrombus is just a blood clot. That's just like hanging out on the side of a vessel. An embolus is when a thrombus starts moving, okay? If that embolus then gets wedged into a very important vessel, you could get a stroke, okay? So if you have an embolism, that's where you have a blood clot that's traveled to the brain and blocks oxygen to that part of the brain to the point where you can't function anymore. So a lot of times what people worry about, what my dad worried about when he had the surgery, is that he had a friend who, when they were doing the surgery and they were clearing out an occluded artery, that what they didn't realize was that a little bit of that occlusion became an embolus, and it traveled. So once they were clearing it out, everything was fine. It traveled, it had like escaped their notice, it got into the blood system again, and it traveled to his brain, and he went into a coma. So his friend eventually came out of it, but then my dad had to have surgery like a month later, and he was terrified that was going to happen to him, which is bad because then his stress was increased and his blood pressure was worse, making everything worse. Everybody's fine now. Okay, so if you have a blood clot in your periphery, it's just painful. Eventually, it does get broken down because you have that skeletal muscle that's you kind of keep moving it, and then it'll break it. If you have a blood clot block part of your brain, that's a stroke. If it's happening in a coronary artery, that is a myocardial infarction or a heart attack. If that isn't treated quickly, that does very often lead to death. Okay, so this is what I was talking about, a coronary bypass. So that's where you have these arteries where something really bad's happening, and you have to kind of cut them and reconnect them beyond the area where the problematic section is. Okay, so you take a little bit of vein from the patient, you use it to replace a bit of that clogged or damaged artery, which is a graft, and then you just we basically sew them back together. It's a super tiny needle and thread. We can now do this laparoscopically, where you take basically a little robot camera, put it up there. The doctor works through that camera and looks so you don't get large scars, depending on the health of the patient. So my dad, since he'd been smoking for so long, had such a bad heart that they had to go in and like just open up his chest completely to do it. So smoking is very bad for you. Don't do it. Oh, and that's it. We were going to go into this in more detail, but I think that is enough. I think we've got to the point where the heart is not as complicated as people might think it is. It's just two pumps and then four chambers that fill up and these very important valves and the lungs that are, these are the, anyway, go back and listen to it if you need some refreshers. But it's a very, very important muscle, complicated muscle that we have to be sure we take care of really well. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.